In this 3-part tutorial series, we'll be creating this realistic office chair in Blender. So in part 1 and part 2, we'll be modeling the office chair, and then in part 3, we'll be doing all the materials and the lighting and the rendering. And if you're interested in purchasing the finished tutorial project files, then you can get that with the links in the description, and that's also a great way to help support this channel. So when you purchase the project files, you'll get any resources that you need for the tutorial, like textures or materials, and you'll also get the finished chair 3D model, Blender file, and the final render. And then one more thing before we start this part, I wanted to let you know about my furniture and home asset pack for Blender. In this furniture and home 3D model asset pack, you will get 250 furniture and home Blender 3D models, pre-set up for Blender's asset browser and ready to add to your projects. Quickly fill in your 3D scenes just by dragging the models from the asset browser into your 3D scenes. The models have been split up into 5 different categories in the asset browser. The categories include office assets, living room assets, kitchen assets, dining room assets, and a combined bedroom and bathroom assets. There's also a free demo available that you can try out before purchasing. Check out the product with the links in the description, and you can also find the full product video with the link in the description. So before we start, I am going to be downloading a few resources to create this tutorial, so I'll have all the links in the description. So the first resource is this HDRI here from polyhaven.com, and I'll just be downloading the 1K HDR version, so link is in the description, and we'll be using this in the background world to get some nice realistic lighting and reflections in the scene. Now all of the materials are going to be created procedurally, so I'm going to be using my procedural black leather material, and I have a tutorial on how to create that, so if you want to go ahead and watch that tutorial, the link will be in the video description. Or if you'd like to purchase the material just to add it into the project when you're following the tutorial, then you can purchase the material on my Gumroad and Patreon, so link is in the description whether you want to purchase the material or watch the tutorial. Or if you're one of my customers of my Ultimate Blender Procedural Material Pack, then you already have the leather material, so you can just open up the asset library and then just drag and drop the leather material onto the object. So here I am in a new scene in Blender, and my screencast keys will be right down here in the corner. So I'm just going to start by selecting everything, and let's just delete everything. And we're going to go to the add menu, and we're going to add a new plane. Now I want to model this closer to the real life scale in Blender, and the default objects are pretty large. So I'm going to scale this down by a 0.27 and then hit enter. So scale it down by 0.27, and then I will just hit Control A and we will apply the object scale. So I'm going to go into edit mode and make sure you are on front view. So hit 1 on the numpad to go to front view, and then I'm going to add a loop cut. So hit Control R for a loop cut, and then just left click and right click so the loop is in the center. And then I want to box select this side, and we're just going to delete the vertices. And now we can add a mirror modifier. So if we go over here to the modifiers, let's click on add modifier, and we're going to add the mirror modifier. And this, by the way, this is going to be the seat of the chair. Now what I want to do is scale this down on the y-axis because we're going to be modeling kind of these little humps with some little creases. So I'm going to scale this object down in edit mode. We're going to scale it down on the y-axis. And I'm going to type in 0.18. So scale it down by 0.18 and hit enter. So then in between here, we're going to have little creases and then it will kind of hump up. And then also something that I forgot to do is turn on the clipping button. So the clipping button will merge it with the mirror. Let's save our project. So I'll click on file and we'll save this. And I'll just save this as office chair, and I'll just click on save Blender file. So then just hit Control S as you're working on the project to save it. So then back in edit mode, what I want to do is model this part so it kind of curves down, and then want to have kind of a little crease here, and then we're going to use an array modifier to array it over. So what I'm going to do is hit Control R to add a loop cut this way, and then left click and right click, and then if we just box select these vertices, we're going to delete them. So now we can also turn on the Y here on the axes, so that it's mirroring it over on the X axis and the Y axis. So we can just model one corner. So let's now hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view, and in edit mode, we're going to go into wireframe, and I'm just going to box select the center vertices. Now if you zoom out here, you can see there are these different little Blender grids here. I'm going to zoom in though, because within these larger grids, there are also these smaller grids. So I'll zoom in here, and so you can kind of see the size of these smaller grids. So I'm going to bring up these vertices on the Z-axis just a little bit larger than one of these mini grids. So I'll now go over to this side, I'll deselect everything, and just box select these vertices here on the end. And I'm going to extrude these down, maybe just extrude them down by about 1/3 of a grid. So you can see there's an entire grid, there's about half, so there's about 1/3, just like that. And then I'll extrude it out, and we'll extrude it out on the y-axis just a little bit farther like that. So we have this little crease part here. And then if you look over here on the other side, because we're mirroring it over, it's also there on the other side. So let's go back to solid view, and I will go back to object mode, and we now want to add an array modifier. So if we open up the side panel, we'll click on add modifier, and we can add an array modifier. And then if I go to the array settings, we want to use the Y instead of Z, or we want to use the Y instead of X. So I'll turn the X to 0, and then I'm going to turn the Y to 1. And this way it'll array it over on the Y axis instead. And then on the count here, I'm going to turn this up to 5. So then I'm going to hit Control 2. Control 2 is going to add a subdivision surface modifier. So now it smooths that all out, and then I'm going to shade that object smooth. And then let's go to top view, and I will go into wireframe, and I'm going to bring it over on the Y axis, and I'm going to move it here into the center. So move it into the very center, so there's 2 on this side and 2 on this side, and then that 1 in the center. Now, if you zoom in here, you can see there's a problem, and it's with the modifier stack. So you can see right here, these aren't merging together. And that's because we're arraying it over, and then we're adding the subsurf, but the arrayed objects aren't actually connected to each other because they're still a modifier. So what I'm going to do is click on the dropdown and apply the mirror, and then click on the dropdown here and apply the array. So now if we go into edit mode, you can see they're still not connected, but there's going to be some vertices which are on top of each other. So if I hit 5 on the numpad to go to orthographic view and zoom in, you can see here's one side of the array, and then here is the other side of the array right over there. So I want to merge them. So I'm going to select everything, and we're going to hit M, and we're going to merge by distance, and now it merged the overlapping vertices, and now you can see there isn't that gap there, and the subsurf is nicely smoothing all of that out. So now what I want to do, if I go to top view by hitting 7 on the numpad, is I want to make this side a bit longer and this side a bit longer. So let's go into edit mode, and I'm going to go into wireframe. We're going to deselect everything, and we're going to box select these vertices. So those loops there and that loop, and then box select these vertices. And I'm going to scale them along the Y axis. So scale them along the Y just a little bit longer. Then if I deselect everything and just box select the end here and box select this end, I'm going to scale that up on the Y axis again and make it even longer. So something like that. So if I go back to solid view, go back into object mode, you can see there's 3 shorter ones, and then there's a larger one at the end of the seat, and then this bigger one also as well at the front of the seat. Now we have these 3 creases right here in edit mode, but you can see we also have creases on the very front and also the very end, but I want to extrude these back and kind of round this out so it can be the bottom of the seat. So I actually want to delete these creases. So if we go to the face select, we're going to select this face and shift select this face, and we'll delete the faces. And then also here on this side, just box select these and delete the faces. And then if we go over here to the other side, let's zoom in here, just hit B for the box select and box select those 4 mini faces right there. And we're just going to delete those faces. Let's hit Control S again to save the project. So let's now go to side view by hitting 3 on the numpad. We'll go into edit mode, and we'll go into wireframe. And we're going to click here to go to the vertex select. So now I want to extrude this down and make it kind of curve around. So let's box select the endpoints right here, and we'll hit E to extrude, bring it down here, place it about there, hit E to extrude again, and just continue to extrude it. So what we're going to do is we're going to have it be thicker right here, kind of in a circle, then it will come up a little bit and then be straight and connect. So we'll extrude this again, bring it over on the Y, extrude this again, extrude it again, bring it up just a little bit, and then we're going to extrude this again and bring it all the way over on the Y axis. Then we're going to start to extrude this up a little bit and extrude up again, and then we just want to connect these two. So if I go back to solid view, let's select this vertex, shift select this vertex, hit F, shift select these vertices and hit F, and then right here if we select these 2 vertices, hit F, and that's going to fill that. So you can start to see we're kind of getting the shape of the bottom cushion there on the chair. Now if we go back to side view and go back into wireframe and go back into edit mode, I think this entire thing is a little bit thick. So I'm just going to box select the end here and kind of drag this back a little bit. And then if we box select all of these on the bottom, let's bring this up a little bit. So roughly, you can see with the Blender grids here, I want this roughly to be about 1 Blender grid tall. So like that, maybe bring it up a little bit, maybe box select this and bring it back a little bit. Box select that here and bring that up just a little bit. Now I want this to be about 6 grids long. So you can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so it's a little bit too long on this side and this side. So in wireframe, if I just box select these here, let's drag it back a little bit more. You can also squish it down on the Y axis. And then if I box select these here, drag that back a little bit, drag that back a little bit so it's just a little bit smaller. And you could even select everything and scale everything down slightly on the y-axis. So now it's roughly about 6 of those grids long. So let's now go to solid view, and in edit mode I want to add 2 more loop cuts right here to add more geometry. So I'll hit Control R and I'll scroll my mouse wheel to their 2 loop cuts, and I'll left click and right click so they stay where they are. And then also we can add another mirror. So if I go into wireframe, we can box select this side and we'll delete the vertices, and then we'll click on add modifier and we'll add a mirror modifier. And let's click on the dots here and drag the mirror modifier above the subdivision surface, and then we can also turn on the clipping button to merge it with the mirror. So that way we can just model one side again. So then right over here on this edge, we want this edge to kind of be smoother because we're going to be kind of adding another object here, which is going to connect this and kind of fill the end here of the cushion. So I want to kind of flatten this. So if we go to front view and go to edit mode, we can go to wireframe, and we're just going to box select all of these vertices here. So you can see I want to select all of these vertices on the very top on this edge, and I want to scale it down on the z-axis, and we're just going to make it really flat. We're not going to fully flatten it, but we're going to make it much more flat. So just like that. So you can kind of see as it gets closer, it kind of gets a bit more smoothed out. We could also bring these all down just a little bit on the z-axis. So now what I want to do is actually duplicate this loop here to make the other piece. So if you hold down the Alt key, you can select that loop, and I'll hit Shift D to duplicate, and let's just bring it out very slightly along the x-axis. So if I go to top view, you can see it's just slightly farther away, and then we'll hit P, and we're going to separate by selection, so that's its own object. So we'll go to object mode, we're just going to select this new piece here, and we'll go into edit mode, and I don't want to have all these little extra vertices here. If I zoom in, you can see there's all these little vertices here for that crease that we made, but I don't want that. So if I select everything, we're going to hit M, and we're going to merge by distance. So you can see it didn't really do anything because there wasn't any overlapping vertices, but if I open up the merge by distance, we can turn up the merge distance, and we're just going to turn up just enough so that it merges those together. So now you can see those are merged, so just make sure those really close ones are all merged, but we don't want to merge it too far because if I turn it up too high, it's going to start to get rid of the mesh. So for me, a 0.0061 is fine, but just make sure these parts here are just merged together. So we're now going to hit E to extrude to give it some thickness, and then we're going to hit S to scale right after we extrude it. We're just going to scale it down a little bit and then scale it down on the z-axis. Just like that. Now you can see it's not really quite even because it's like thicker here and thinner here, and these lines are also kind of moving at an angle, so I want to fix this. So we'll go to side view, and let's just kind of drag this down here. We can use the box select and click with our middle mouse wheel and deselect these ones in the center. So deselect those and maybe drag this over like that. So basically I want to make sure that this right here is all going to have an even thickness. So what I'm going to do is just kind of manually select each vertex and hit G to grab and just kind of move them around so that this entire part here all the way around that we extruded, it's more even thickness. So you can see this is like way too thick. So just select these vertices and drag them back a little bit so that it's more even thickness. And then also here, drag this over here, and that right over there so that these are kind of going down instead of being all sloped. So let's just fix that there. All right, that's pretty good. So now you can see they pretty much all have even thickness all the way around. So now what I want to do is manually fill all this so it's filled with faces. But you can see right here, there isn't very many vertices on the bottom, but there is on the top. So I'm going to hit Control R to add a loop cut, and then we'll drag this over and place it above this one. And then hit Control R again, add another loop cut, and you can adjust it if it's kind of cocked a little bit. Let's add another loop cut there above that one, another loop cut there above that one, another one above that one, and then another one above that one. So we should have pretty much similar topology on the top and the bottom. So now what I can do is select these two vertices and I can extrude this out. So hit E to extrude, then we can extrude out again. And then if you want to like select these three vertices, you can hit F to fill a face. We'll select these three, hit F. We can select these two vertices and hit F to fill that. Maybe bring this over, and then select these two and hit F to fill that. Then if we select these two vertices in the middle again, we can extrude it out like that. And I want to hit Control R to add another loop cut here so that there's a bit more topology. And then select these two and hit F, and these two and hit F. And then we will extrude this out again. So just select these two in the middle and extrude that out, maybe scale it down a little bit, and we're going to extrude it again. And we're just going to continue to extrude it, and I'm extruding it so it's right above and below these vertices here so that we can fill faces in between. All right, just like that. Keep on extruding it like that. And then if I select these two vertices, I'll just hit the F key a bunch of times to fill faces there. And then these two vertices, I'll hit F to fill a bunch of faces right there. So now we can just select these two and we'll hit E to extrude one more time, scale it down a bit. We can fill a face there. We can fill a face there. And then I can just shift select these four, fill a face, and then these three and fill a face. Just like that. So now if you zoom out here, you can see this is all flat. So now what I want to do is give it some thickness to make it look like it's a cushion and kind of have it pop out. So what I'm going to do is go to the face select, and we're going to hit B for the box select and just box select all of these in the very center like that. And let's also bring them over just slightly so they're more in the center. And then I can go to top view and I can just drag them out a bit so they're kind of popping out just like that. So it looks like it's kind of popping out and the cushion is full of like a padding. And then also right here, you can see this kind of curves up, and that's because of the other loop. So if I go to the vertex select and alt select that loop there, go into wireframe and make sure that entire loop is selected all the way around. So what I want to do is also pop this out. So let's bring it out along the y-axis. Just like that, kind of pop it out a bit. And then if we hold down the Alt key and select the entire outer loop, we could scale the entire thing down a little bit. Also scale it down on just the Z-axis and bring it in just slightly. Just like that. So it kind of looks like it's popping out. And then we will use the object context menu and shade that smooth. Also, it looks like right here, this could maybe be brought out just a little bit more. And then these two could maybe be brought in a little bit because it was kind of popping out a little bit too much. And then there are a few gaps where it's a little bit too large. So if I go into edit mode and box select these vertices, I'll just drag them down a little bit, maybe drag these down a little bit. Now we are going to be adding another object in here where this kind of gap is, but I just want to make sure the gap isn't too big. So drag this up here. You can kind of see right here, there's kind of a big gap. So let's drag this back and we can drag this up a little bit. Maybe box select these, select these here and drag them up a little bit just to fix that gap there. But we will be adding an object in the very middle there to kind of fix those gaps. And box select these here and drag them out just a little bit. Box select this here and drag that down. So I'm going to go back into edit mode and we're going to go to the vertex select and we're going to alt select that outer loop there and we're going to duplicate it, hit escape so it stays where it is, and I'll hit P and we're going to separate by selection. So now let's go into object mode and we're just going to select that new object that we made. So that one right there, and we'll go into edit mode and we're going to go to top view. I'll go into wireframe, and if I just select everything, we're going to extrude it just slightly. So extrude it in a little bit so that it has some thickness. And then if we select everything, we can squish it down a little bit. So scale it down on the y-axis and just bring it right here in the very center. And this is going to be kind of a little lip part in the leather, which is going to kind of fill that little seam right there. All right, so it's just kind of a thin little seam. So now let's give it some thickness by adding a solidify modifier. So add solidify, and if we go to side view and go into wireframe, you can see it's much too thick. So if we go to the solidify settings, let's just turn up the thickness, and we're going to turn it to a negative value so it's going slightly out. So just make it really, really small. You might need to change the value manually, like a 0.0007, something like that. So it just has a little bit of thickness there. Now what I also want to do is add a subsurf modifier. So let's click on add modifier and we'll add a subdivision surface. And then if we hit 5 to go to an orthographic view, we're going to zoom right in here. You can kind of see the subsurface smoothing out. So we'll shade the object smooth. And then here on the subsurf settings, let's turn the viewport and render levels both up to 3. Now it's a little bit hard to see, and I think that the entire thing is just a little bit too small. So let's go into top view and go into edit mode and go into wireframe, and we're just going to scale it up a little bit so it's a little bit thicker, like that. And then if we go to side view by hitting 3 on the numpad, we also want to make the entire thing a little bit thicker. So let's go here to the solidify, and let's turn this up a little bit more. So maybe like a 0.001, or maybe even a little bit more, 0.0015, so it's a bit thicker, like that. So now if I kind of zoom out here, go back to object mode, you can definitely see that a bit better because it's a bit thicker. Now, if I go to orthographic view and zoom in really close, you can see it's not really round, it's pretty sharp. And so that's because I need to change the order of the modifier stack. So let's just click on these arrows just to minimize all of the modifiers. And I don't know why this happened, but for some reason I added 2 subdivision surface modifiers. So on the last one here, if you have this, just delete that one. We just need a mirror, a subdivision, and a solidify. So what I want to do is actually add the solidify first. So we'll drag the solidify up to the very top. So it first gives it thickness. Then after that, we can have it add the subdivision surface, so the subsurface can come next. So it first gives it thickness, then it adds the subdivision surface, and then finally it mirrors it over to the other side. And now you can see it looks much more like a round shape. Now there's a few spots here where it's kind of overlapping. So if we go into edit mode, let's just box select some of these, and we can kind of just drag them over. So drag this out a little bit, and we'll drag this out a little bit. What you can also do is select everything and then hit Alt S, and Alt S is going to scale it along the normals, so the direction of the faces. You can kind of bring that out a little bit. Let's also select everything and scale it up a little bit more on the y-axis, so it's just a little bit thicker. So like right here, we need to box like this and bring it out a little bit. Now the solidify still isn't thick enough, so if we open up the solidify, let's just make it a little bit thicker. So we kind of just need to play around with this, maybe like a 0.003. That's quite a bit better. So now it looks much more of a round shape. Maybe I'll just make it a tiny little bit thicker, 0.0035. So now you're just going to need to go along here and just make sure that it's right in between that little gap. So just kind of go along here and just manually adjust anything if you need to. So I might box select these and bring them up just a little bit, and box select these and bring them up just a little bit. Right over here on the end, I might box select these and just bring them back slightly. All right, and then bring them over to the side just a little. All right, so I'm just navigating around here and taking a look at the entire mesh and making sure nothing is like too big or too small, making sure it isn't overlapping. So that's looking pretty good. Oh, I found one spot right here where it's slightly open. So if I go into edit mode, go into wireframe, just box select these vertices, I can drag them in a little bit so it's kind of covering up that gap. Also, like right here, this gets a little bit thin. You can see it's slightly thin. So if I just box select those vertices, I can bring them down on the z-axis a little bit. Let's take a look at it from another angle. So now here in the very middle, I just want to make this seat kind of puff up slightly. So we'll go into edit mode of the main object. Let's go to front view and we'll go into wireframe, and we're just going to box select the very inner vertices here. And then let's hit the O key to turn on the proportional editing, and I'll hit G to grab and bring it up on the Z axis. And then I need to scroll my mouse wheel to change the size of the proportional editing. And we're just going to make it pop up slightly. So it kind of looks like this part is puffing up a little bit, just like that. So it slightly rounds over. So now what I want to do is duplicate all the objects that we just made, and we're going to make the back seat rest. So if we just hit A to select everything and go to side view, we'll duplicate it and we'll rotate it by 90 degrees. And I need to hit negative, so we need to rotate it by negative 90. So rotate it by 90 and then hit negative and then enter. So it's negative 90, and we'll just drag this piece down here. So now we just need to fix the shape of this. And I want to make this about 6.5 tall. So you can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6.5 tall. So I want to make it about that tall. So what we can do with all the objects selected is go into edit mode, and we can edit them all together. So I'm going to select everything and just scale it up a little bit on the Z axis. And then if we just like box select the very top here, let's just bring this up a little bit more, just like that, so that it's about 6.5 grids tall. Now also right over here on this side, you can see there really isn't much topology here. And so as we try to rotate this, it's not going to really be smooth. So I'm going to hit Control R, and I'm going to scroll my mouse wheel to add lots of loop cuts, maybe about 7 cuts. So left click and right click so it stays where it is, like that. So now we can kind of edit the shape of this. So I'm going to go into wireframe, go to side view, and I want to give kind of that like lumbar support, which is going to kind of pop out here and go back in so it's slightly curved. So let's box select these vertices here, and we'll drag that out a little bit. You can scroll your mouse wheel to change the size of the proportional editing. Also, this big part here, it's kind of lumping out too much. So if we just box select these vertices, I'll drag this in a little bit, box select these vertices and drag it in a little bit, and then we can make this more flat. So we're going to box select this here, drag this up a little bit, box select this here and drag this up a little bit, box select that there and drag it down a little bit, and maybe drag this up slightly, just like that, so it kind of rotates along that piece. And then box select these pieces here and bring it in just a little bit so it's a little bit more flat there. So then we have this lumbar support, which kind of brings it out farther and then comes back in, and that's really nice for office chairs. A lot of office chairs have that because it's better posture. So it kind of comes in a little bit or comes forward and then goes back a little bit. That's a much better shape. And then you can see a few things might have gotten messed up because we use proportional editing, kind of move things around. So we might need to fill some gaps. So if I Alt select that loop there, let's just drag this bit back in a little bit. If I go into edit mode with this little loop piece, we can add another loop cut right there and drag it out slightly. Maybe drag this back slightly just to kind of fill that gap there. And just take a look around the model and make sure there isn't any like holes or seams. So most of it looks pretty good. You can see like right here, that is a problem. So in edit mode, I can just box select that piece and just drag it out just slightly. Maybe select the bottom and bring it up slightly. All right, so that's a bit better, although right there it's still kind of overlapping. So if we box select these pieces, let's drag it up and down a little bit. All right, and then this piece here, we can maybe drag that in just a little bit to connect. So just make sure there isn't really any gap or opening along the model. So I'll just go along here and kind of check. So that all looks good. All right, that looks good there. So we're going to be modeling one more object in this part, and that's going to be a little plastic piece, which is kind of connecting these two chair pieces together. So let's hit Shift C to center the 3D cursor, and I'm going to add a cube, and we're going to go into edit mode, and we're going to scale this way down in edit mode. Let's also turn off proportional editing because we don't need it. So we'll go to front view, actually go to side view, and in object mode, we'll drag it down. Then in edit mode, we're going to squish the entire thing down like that, and then we can kind of bring it up a little bit. And back in edit mode, we can box select this side and drag that out a little bit, and then box select this side and drag that out a bit. And we can start to rotate this and extrude it. So extrude this face out, rotate it and move it around. And we're just going to have it kind of curving around so it connects the chair together. So extrude this, rotate it and move it around. And we're just going to continue to extrude this and rotate it and move it. We're going to bring it up a little bit farther and then just have it end right about there. So you kind of see the shape of the object. That's what I'm going for. All right, so now let's add some modifiers to this object. So I'm going to add a bevel modifier, and we'll turn the segments up to like a 4, and then we can just hold down the shift key and drag the amount to make the movements more sensitive. We're just going to make this a very small value, so maybe like a 0.0015, just like that, maybe even a little bit smaller, to just kind of get it so there's a pretty small bevel, and then we'll shade the object smooth. So you can see right here, it still looks a little bit chunky. So I'm going to hit Control 1. Control 1 will add a subdivision surface, and we'll make the levels viewport and render. We'll just both set those to 1. But that's going to kind of smooth that out. Now you can see there are some parts of the bevel where it's adding a bevel here and kind of sharpening this, and that's because the limit angle. So if we just go into wireframe, go into edit mode, we can maybe box select that and drag it out a little bit. You can see because of the angle limit, if I drag this back here, it's more sharp, but then if I kind of drag it right there, it kind of pops right there, pops over and is more smooth because it's not adding a bevel to that spot. And then finally, what I want to do is also add the weighted normal modifier. So add weighted normal, and I find the weighted normal just kind of sharpens things and flattens things. You can see here it is before and there it is after. So it just kind of flattens those sharp areas. So let's just hit Control S to save, and this is going to wrap it up for part 1 of the realistic office chair tutorial series. So I hope you've been easily able to follow along, and I hope you're enjoying it so far, and thank you for watching. And so in part 2, we're going to be finishing all the modeling. So when part 2 is released, the link will be in the video description, and I'll also have it right up there on the end screen. And if you're enjoying this tutorial series and you'd like to help support me and this channel, a great way to do that is by purchasing the finished tutorial project files, and you can get that on my Gumroad store and my Patreon page, and also the Superhive Market. So all the links are in the description. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in part 2.